12 killed over the weekend, 40 injured. We talked about the shootings yesterday. On the phone with us today, he is the police superintendent of Chicago. It's Garry McCarthy. Garry, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning, Pete. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Garry.
Well, Garry, first of all, I want to ask you about the ceremony you guys had last night. You had your annual police recognition ceremony, is that right?
Yeah, yesterday we had, I don't know how many people there, probably about 1,000 people, and we honored somewhere around 100 police officers. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but, you know, we did a couple we do this every year, and it just never fails to amaze me to hear the stories and the courage and the fortitude of these young men and women. And two of the awards we gave out yesterday. One was posthumous to a fellow named Lupe Pena, who got the Leadership Award. He died of cancer last year after being promoted and to commander in the 25th District, which is where he grew up. And this guy literally worked till the day, like 2 days before he passed away, when he couldn't get to work anymore. And then the second one that we gave out was an award to, if you remember the story of Tom Wortham, who was a police officer who got killed outside his residence when he was robbed for his motorcycle and he got into a shootout with the bad guys. His father, Tom Wortham, I think the third, came out of the house, and he's a retired sergeant, and got into a shootout and shot and killed one of the bad guys. I mean, just a terribly tragic story, but we kind of broke precedent, and we actually gave an award to a retired police officer as if he was still active with us, and I was really happy to do that.
Hey, Garry, this was not the first awards dinner you guys have had since the passing of Dennis Farina, the Chicago cop turned actor. What did his death do for the families of victims of Chicago cops who've lost their lives?
Well, Dennis was great. He was involved in all the charities that we were involved in, like the 100 Club and the Police Memorial Foundation, and just a regular guy. I mean, I met the guy a couple of times, and he was just a down-to-earth, nice guy. And he was so supportive. He was doing commercials. He did some promos with Gary Sinise and Dennis Franz and a couple other people, and raised a lot of money for those families. So he's a big loss to the Chicago police family. Let's put it that way.
Police Chief Garry McCarthy on the phone with us. Garry, we talked about this yesterday. 12 killed over the weekend, 40 injured, and we hear about these stats, and we've almost become immune to them when we hear them every Monday morning. What can we do? We talked about that yesterday. As a community, what can we do when we hear about these shootings?
Pete, it's real simple, and this is a source of frustration for me because I've been here for 4 years. And the second I got here, everybody said to me, what's the difference between New York and Chicago? And I said, it's real simple. Besides the pizza, which I like New York pizza better, the proliferation of firearms in this city.
Mm-hmm.
We seize more guns than any city in the country every single year. 3-1 compared to Los Angeles, 7-1 compared to New York. And until something changes in the gun laws in this state, if these kids were throwing rocks at each other, we wouldn't have the same problem. But this doesn't resonate. And this is not up to me. This is up to our legislators. But until they hear it from the people that they demand that this is what we want, I mean, you know, it's really a tragedy because we can change the way we do policing. We're doing that. We've created a much more functional department that's much more focused on what's happening. And we seized 95 guns over this past weekend. And God knows that was only a drop in the bucket compared to what's out there.
Right.
It's real simple. We're not going to fix poverty, education, or the breakup of the family unit overnight. But what we can do is something about the guns. And that's up to the community because they have to demand it of the legislators.
And Garry, when you see the video of the sleeping cop in his car that goes viral and has over 800,000 views, you as the police chief of Chicago, what are you feeling at that moment?
Well, the first thing I'm feeling is, thank God that officer's still alive, because he could have been killed.
Right.
It's really dangerous for police officers to be in that situation. The second thing is anger. And, the officer's been disciplined. Obviously we identified him immediately. He's been disciplined, and that's all there is to it. Hopefully it's something that doesn't occur again, because then it's called progressive discipline. This time he lost 5 vacation days. Next time he could lose 10 or 15 and so on. The officer had a decent record. I don't know what his excuse was, what his story was, but, that's intolerable.
Superintendent McCarthy, you see stories like the sleeping police officer in the headlines nationally. You see stories like our crime statistics in the headlines nationally. This morning, there were a couple of robberies right here near the John Hancock Center where our station is. And there was a woman shot sitting on her couch in her home in the 3600 block of South Honoré. The city of Chicago, you talk about all these long-term solutions, but in the short term, every time you see all these headlines, there's a discussion of should something federally be done as well to help us here in Chicago? What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, there is something being done federally. We're in more federal task forces than you can shake a stick at. We're in task forces with the FBI, the ATF, and the DEA, for example, the three main enforcement components of the federal arm. They give us an awful lot of help. But, here's what I got to say. The criminal justice system is exactly that. It's a system. And if we're going to focus on what the police are doing and only on what the police are doing, we're fooling ourselves. If the laws don't support the initiatives that we're putting together, then it's useless. For instance, in the first quarter of this year, when we had an increase in shootings and murders, we also had a 60% increase in gun arrests. 60. What does that tell you? It tells you that, first of all, we're doing our jobs because as law enforcement, we're enforcing the law and getting those people off the street. The question becomes, what happens to those people? We made 688 individuals. We put 688 individuals under arrest 692 times. Now you say, well, how can that happen? That means that 4 people got arrested twice in a 90-day period with firearms in the first quarter of this year. By April 1st, 2 out of those 4 were out of prison. 2 weeks later, 3 out of 4 were out of prison. Those 688 individuals, by April 1st, 60% of them were already out of jail. And right now, 70% of them are out of jail. What's wrong with this picture? And if you look at what's happening in this country, the focus is on policing. We're the most visible arm of the government. Absolutely true. But I want you to think about this. People got very angry, and rightfully so, about what had happened in Ferguson, Missouri. But when there was no indictment of that officer, they had anti-police protests. They didn't have anti-prosecutor protests. They didn't have anti-grand jury protests. So until the rest of the system supports what we're doing, we're only going to have marginal success. And we're having success, Kathy. You know that last year we finished with the lowest murder rate in the city since 1965. You know that the crime rate has been going down over and over again, time and time again, to like 1970 levels. But we're not going to break through and fix this thing by ourselves if we're only focusing on policing.
Goes back to the laws. Garry McCarthy. Gary, Game 6 tonight at the United Center. Are you going?
I can't because I'm doing a gang call-in. I am out literally every night, Pete, doing community meetings.
Jeez.
Or in this case, it's a gang call-in where we bring in parolees who are gang members and we give them 3 messages. The first one is put down the guns, but we're going to do what we always do, which is arrest you. We're going to focus on your group. Second message comes from the community saying we're sick and tired of the violence. And the third message comes from social services saying, look, we'll help you get out of the game if that's what you want to do. I'd love to be watching the Blackhawks. I'll probably catch the middle of the second period to the end of the game. And my expectation is that we're going to be watching the Stanley Cup final here.
That'd be great. Hopefully we'll see you at the United Center next week then for the final round of this postseason.
Maybe I'll try and schedule something. We'll see how that works out.
Garry McCarthy. Gary, thanks for coming on. We know you're busy. I appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks.